Welcome in, everyone, to a very special episode of American Joyride. I'm joined today by James Witkowski. He is a former Army Ranger and former teammate of a previous guest, Les Sandusky. We'll get into that a little bit later in the interview, but a lot of that and more. James, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I got to be honest, I love the Army Rangers. I think that they're, short of Delta Force, the most fascinating military unit in the entire military. They're just absolute hard dudes. So whenever I can get an Army Ranger on the show, just like Les or Jeff Struck or Brad Thomas, any of those guys, I mean, you're talking, they're just fascinating stories. And we're going to kind of unpack your life history, your military history. You got some cool stories to tell. But first, before we kind of get into that, let's do a little background. Why did you join the military, and kind of what was your upbringing like that maybe motivated that?
So I kind of come from a military, or I guess I could you come from a military family. Both grandfathers served in World War II. I had great uncles that served in World War II as well. My dad went to the Air Force Academy. He was in the Air Force, like 6 to 10 years, and then my oldest brother, he's still in the Air Force. Um, he's currently, if I remember correctly, he's currently a major. He flies on. He's a electronic warfare officer for B-52s. So I just kind of had the military and in my family, like when me and my younger brother would go out and play, we always pretended we were either in the Civil War, World War I, World War II. Like we had a ditch behind our backyard that would for most of the summer would be pretty dry, so we pretend like we were in the trenches during World War I and stuff. So it's just kind of part of like my family's culture that we love history, we love the military. But kind of the defining moment was, even though I was still pretty young, but was 9/11. Um, I think that's true for a lot of guys, around my age as well, or our age as well, is that um, once you realize that there was we were at war and you see the war going on for 10 plus years, like waiting to get in. Like it was just, that was my motivating factor. Like at around 12 years old, I told my parents that I was just going to join the Army out of high school. And they were like, nope, you got to go to college. You got to, try to go to the West Point or Air Force Academy or, Naval Academy. You got to try to go to college first. And I was like, no, no, no. I'm enlisting. Uh, so I tried to enlist at 17. Parents didn't agree with that. So when I was 18, I told them like, "Hey, I'm gonna enlist. So like, either have your blessing or don't." And it's kind of like a half blessing. Like they still wanted me to go to college first. Um, and then I went through the recruitment process. Um, got to MEPS, and I told the recruiters that I had asthma. Didn't really affect me as much as since I was older, but like I still told them I have asthma. I have a rescue inhaler. Apparently they didn't put any of that on my like information. So when I got the MEPS or like the forms, whatever, I told them like, yeah, I have asthma. Um, the doctors there like, nope, denied, sent me back. So then I spent the next year doing some like medical, like paying out of pocket for these different tests. Basically, say, hey, I can like getting on a treadmill and running in front of doctors and stuff to prove that like the asthma didn't affect me. So then at 19, I finally was able to go in, went through the process again, got to MEPS. And this time when I told them I had asthma, they're like, yep. But they saw I had all the medical paperwork with me, proving that like, I could do the job. They signed off on it. And then I finally shipped out in May of 2012.
And
Um,
was your goal always when you joined to join the Army Rangers, or were you joining kind of not maybe with that being the intention?
I didn't really know a whole lot about the Rangers. Like I'd seen the movie and Black Hawk Down and read the book Black Hawk Down. But my original goal is just be infantry. So when I got to basic, my original orders were for Germany as a part of a striker unit or mechanized infantry unit. Um, but towards the end of basic, uh, I got called into our drill sergeant's office with a couple of other guys. And like most of the other guys that called in there were, I guess I want to say like the troublemakers, like guys that constantly got into fights. And I was also a guy that got into a scrape here and there in basic as well. But like I never got caught by the drill sergeants. But when they called us into the office, it's like, oh crap, we're getting kicked out. Like that's pretty much the one reason you get called in. Like right before lights out, and I was just like, ah, man, like this is it. But we got in there, and they're like, hey, we have, I think it may have been like 6 or 8 of us, and they're like, we have 4 contracts for Rangers, 4 contracts for SF selection. Who wants to go where? And so I raised my hand, like, I guess I'll take Ranger. Like most of my understanding about Rangers was through Discovery Channel's documentary on Ranger School. So that's what I thought I was going to at first. Um, but so I took that, and then they changed my orders. I ended up going to airborne school right after basic, and then through pre-RAS for RAS, and yeah.
Well, I want to drill down because we had been talking and you had sent me some stories before the interview about
Yeah.
fighting and things like that. So you started a fight, or maybe someone else started a fight with you. Would you say the first day of basic training?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I definitely like started the. Yeah, I guess I say I started it there. We were like first day basic training. Like we were finally got to our barracks room after getting scuffed up all day. This is Fort Benning, Georgia, so it's like 100 degrees outside, 100% humidity. Everyone's just sucking. We get into our barracks room, and the AC is not working. So the inside is not like, it's not like any relief. It was like, it felt worse inside the barracks room than outside. And I forget, we were doing some type of like administrative work. So we're all standing in a line around the barracks room, just at parade rest. And there's 2 guys that were just basically, they were just making jokes back and forth to each other. And then I looked over and was like, dudes, like shut up, like shut the f up, like we're gonna get in trouble. Because like the Joe Sergeant told us like not to say anything, just stand still, and like if I hear anything, whatever, I'm coming out. Uh, and they just kept doing that, and then eventually they started like mocking me back. And so since I was just so like high strung at that point, I just charged across the kill zone and started like, yeah, I charged across this kill zone and started like choke slamming one of the guys that was a lot bigger than me. And then his buddy behind just starts wailing on the back of my head. And I was like, I didn't like go for a while. And finally I was like, oh crap, what were we doing? Then I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. And then I ran back and I was like, ah, crap. Like I'm sure we're screwed. Because like
So
they're
did
gonna go in first. Like if they say anything, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble. Like I'm getting kicked out on the first day for uh yeah, for choking a guy.
and so, but you didn't get in any trouble. I mean, no one found out that
No,
no one in a
no,
position of authority.
they didn't care. Like it was just one of those things. Yeah, where everybody was sucking. So it was like, yeah, it was just water under the bridge. Like after that, we ended up getting along. But it was just one of those like, man, I look back on it now, like, oh man, I was way too high strung and basic. But
Well,
yeah,
you're young, right? I mean, that makes sense. You're stressed, you're young, you got a shitload of pressure on you that you probably have never felt before in your life. I
yeah,
mean, I think that's kind of by design. That's what they're trying to do. Now, you also said that there was a situation where you had to get someone in MRE, I think, that they had
yeah.
eaten it. And so walk the audience through what happened there. I'm interested to hear that.
Okay, yeah. So actually, it was one of the guys. Like I really didn't, because of how I guess I'm gonna say like serious I took basic training. I definitely like pissed off a lot of guys. Um, but there was a guy that like I didn't necessarily get along with that great, but for whatever reason, the drill sergeant just kind of picked him out, and like he they like during breakfast they would like slammed his tray in his face and like kicked him out. During lunch they did the same thing, and then we go out to one of the ranges, did some training, come back for dinner, and again like they just would not let this dude eat. And again, since it's Georgia, you're just sweating, your body's just craving nutrients, so like they didn't let this guy eat all day. And then I knew where, like we all knew where like the MRE locker was, and I realized that the lock wasn't like that great. So I grabbed a or I made like got some like notebook paper and just folded it really like as tight as I could and just slid it through the door, so I could pop it open. Um, and then I got in there, grabbed MRE out, um, and I knew they kept like a quasi count, so I was like, this could come back on me, but I just felt bad for you. Like he was just, he was starving. Um, so like I basically stuck underneath my shirt or like the ACU blouse. And I went back into the barracks room, and And I grabbed the guy. I was like, "Hey, come here! Like, come with me in the bathroom." He's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Just come with me in the bathroom. Don't ask questions." Um, so we get in there. I was like, "Dude, like, sit in the stall." I showed him I brought an MRE, and then I was like, "Just eat it, and when you get done, like, I'll dispose of it." So he sat in the stall. He let me know when he was done. So I grabbed it, and then I took it out of our barracks and like went outside and hid it in some trash so the drill sergeants wouldn't find it.
That's awesome. I got to ask, what was he doing? What was going on there that the drill sergeants were messing with him to the point they didn't want him to eat? Was he making mistakes? Did he just piss them off?
Um, I mean, most of it was like if you give like cadre during like at least with basic or like with rest, it give cadre a chance to mess with you, or if they see that they're messing with you, it's getting to you, they're just going to keep doing it until it stops. Um, for the most part, so it's basically like I'm not saying it's bullying, but it's kind of bullying to but I also think it's worth it. Like I think I think the hazing in basic and through most training, like most army schools, is worth it to a point. So I think that was most of it. Is they saw an opportunity for a guy that was kind of quasi breaking, so they just kept like hitting him harder. But yeah, after that they kind of left him like not left him alone, but it wasn't as bad. Like he started being able to get some nutrients and stuff.
You said that your kind of expectation of the Rangers was watching a Discovery Channel documentary when you decide
Yep,
that's the path you're going to go. When you actually get to RASP, that's what it's called at that point because it used to be called
yep.
RIP, right? And now
Yep,
it's Ranger.
used to be the Ranger indoctrination program, and then I don't want to say I can't remember if it was 2010 or 2011. It changed to Ranger Assessment and Selection Program. So it went from 3 weeks to 8 weeks.
And when you get there, what was it like compared to what you thought it was going to be like? What were expectations versus reality?
Um, so I knew it was gonna suck, um, because it from watching the Ranger School documentary, like I knew whatever type of Ranger training or Ranger program I was going to go through wasn't going to be pleasant. I would say like airborne school is probably the easiest school in the Army, or at least the easiest one I experienced. Um, and that was one of those like talking with my dad who went through. I think it was like he went through airborne school in like 68 or 69, and he was like, "Yeah, it's gonna suck." But I went through and um, it was yeah, it was pretty easy because it was one of those things where if you get a couple of counseling statements, which are or negative counseling statements, which are could be for falling out of a group run or some other deficiencies like when you're getting ready to jump or stuff like that, you get kicked out. Well, within the first day of airborne school, um, almost pretty much all but like one or two women in our class fell out of the run, and that was a problem because almost every single woman in our class was a higher ranking NCO or an officer. So then the runs got even easier after that, so that way like so that way they could keep up. So then like airborne school just kind of became a joke. So I was by the time I got to pre-RAS, I realized like the entire environment was different because like as soon as you get picked up by cadre and stuff, they're just screaming at you and like calling you all sorts of names and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, this changed. Like we're back. Like this is actually what I expect. Kind of expected even basic training to be. Because even at a certain point, like basic training got not necessarily physically hard, but just it was more meant just because of you were cut off from the outside world. There are times I got boring, so it's almost like just more mentally like you're so bored. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to go home. Um, so RAS was definitely like pre-RAS was definitely I'm gonna call it like the real deal. Um, because like they're trying to get people, they're trying to get you to quit. They're
That's
trying
what
to
I was just going to ask.
yeah.
Is the mentality we need to weed these people out now and just
Yep.
get them gone?
Yep, because like basic training, we had guys that couldn't pass like because you have to shoot or qualify on the range, and you have to get like 30 out of 40 targets. There's the guys that couldn't do that, so then the drill sergeants would literally come on their lane and shoot for them, and then send them on through. So you had guys in basic training that should not have ever graduated that are getting like pushed through. But with RASP, there's none of that. There was just like, yeah, if you can't cut it, you can't cut it. Get it, either recycle or get the hell out. So even after we got the pre-RAS, like our group, like, and I got I got very, I don't want to call it like fortunate or blessed, because there's some guys that because you wait in pre-RAS until there's enough guys to move on to RAS. So some guys wait in pre-RAS for a couple months. I only ended up having to wait there for about a week. But there are even guys just like on the first full day of pre-RAS where you're doing PT in the morning, even though it's not the hardest because it was like basically they did PT to condition you to get ready for RAS. Um, they're not necessarily trying to like break you off then and there, but it's still not necessarily pleasant. Like the first week of pre or the week of pre-RAS, we had few guys quit our group before we even went over. Um, and then the first day of RASP was uh again that was kind of another like gut punch where again, I guess it was what I expected, but also more so. Um, and then I think I don't know if I told you put this in my notes, but like the first day we put all of our bags in the barracks and they were like outside, like just doing push-ups, and then the cadre called my name, they're like, "Hey, Witkowski, Witkowski, whatever, come into the barracks." So I went up there and they held up a dip can. They're like, "Hey, because you're not supposed to have any dip in RASP at all. I think it changed now, so you can have like dip or cigarettes or whatever. By the time you couldn't, and they found it and like, hey, this is like an honor violation. Get the hell out. And I was like, I don't dip, and I really didn't dip. I was like, that can't be mine. It's not mine. And they're like, well, we still found it in your bags, whatever. You calling, do the whole like, are you calling us a liar? I'm like, no, like you push ups. I'm sorry, but it's like it's really not mine. And they're like, and they're like, get the hell out. And I was like, grab your stuff. And I just told no sergeant, like I can't, like it's not mine. Like I did not bring it in. So after getting scuffed in the barracks for a while, were like, all right, fine, you can stay, get out. Like, but, and then later on that day, one of the cadre that was like questioning me about that told me, it's like, came up to me, it's like, I'm gonna get you to quit or commit suicide uh, before the end of RASP. And I'm like, oh, okay. Um, and yeah, that the same cadre would come out, man. Like he would. One day we were in formation. He's like, Witkowski, you're the ugliest motherfucker here. Do push-ups. I'm like, all right, I'm sorry. Stuff now that I laugh at that time. I was like, man, like, I didn't do anything. It wasn't my day. Like, I'm sorry.
How
But
quickly when you're in RASP and they're, I mean, I assume they're not just picking on you, they're targeting a lot of people.
yeah.
How
Oh yeah.
what percentage of people that you went in with didn't end up making it through, if you had to guess?
Um, I would say close to 50%. Because there would be times like, because Coal Range, going to Coal Range, I think that's in three, week 2 or 3 is supposed to be like the hardest week. So like before every event, or even like almost every day, the cadre would be like, hey, or different times on the day, the cadre would be like, hey, look down, or everybody look down, close your eyes. Like if you want to leave, leave. And so like you'd hear people running on the ground like almost every time they did that. So dudes were constantly like just weeding themselves out, and a few guys would get kicked out because of the cadre and stuff, or for honor violations for trying to cheat or different stuff like that.
Was there any point where you thought you were almost gonna quit? Like, or once you got there, was it more like I'd rather die than quit?
Um, it was kind of like I was gonna wait till the next day. There was at least at Cool Range because that did suck a lot. So it was one of those like probably tomorrow I'll quit. And it's just like the next tomorrow can't comes. I was like I can do it. Like I'll quit tomorrow. So I did that, and then um after about week 4 of RASP, it goes more into like it's still not necessarily pleasant, but the attrition rate is a lot less. Then it goes into more like different skills that you need to be part of Ranger Regiment. Um, because like originally, like RIP was just a 3 week smoke fest of trying to weed out dudes that weren't mentally ready, and I think the were mentally physically ready to be in part of regiment. But my understanding is because of the global war on terror, RIP changed to RAS because of the Rangers just deploying constantly. They wanted guys coming into the unit more prepared, so if they came in a week before deployment, they could deploy and have the useful skills to deploy. So
speaking of deployment, that's a great segue.
Yeah,
So you get through RASP, you're finally a member. Where did you say you're the 3rd Ranger Battalion?
3rd Ranger Battalion. Yep. So,
And
and
that's
because
based
of
that's
where
that's in Washington, right?
Fort Benning, so
Wh-
second Georgia. So second is in Washington,
So and
um,
first is in where's the
Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah, Georgia, right?
Yep. So it's funny. Our the mortar like HH so mortars are part of HHC of 3rd Ranger Battalion, and that building was literally right across the fence from the RAS barracks. So as soon as we graduated, we just could walk across the fence and get in there for the most part. So yeah, we get to like our group gets to 3rd Ranger Battalion HHC December of 2012, and then um pretty much like in we because like the 3rd Ranger Battalion was on deployment at the time, so once they all got back, we started the training cycle, and then getting ready to deploy, and then redeployed in August of 2013.
So
And then coming,
about 8 months is what it took from
yep,
graduation to getting into, and you went straight to Afghanistan, right?
yep, yeah, and that's when I got to meet like that's when I met Sandusky because he was coming back from deployment. Um, like the initial meeting with him, and then uh Sergeant Edwards, he came over a couple months after that as well. And it was funny because like when another mortar pointed out our new platoon sergeant, I think like he was in basically civilian clothes, wearing a huge beard because he was coming out of RRC, and then pointing to him like that's our new platoon sergeant. And I'm like, because I thought he was there fixing like he was a contractor doing like work inside of the building. It's like the guy fixing the phone lines. Like that doesn't make sense. We had some other guys like that in there, and he's like, no, that guy. I was like, oh my gosh. Um,
Wait, so your
and then
platoon sergeant had come from the RRC, which is the Rangers Special Mission Unit. Was that Edwards or was that
yeah,
someone else?
no, that was Edwards.
Yeah. For our
And so
viewers who might not know, can you explain
yeah,
who Mike Edwards is?
yeah. So he was our platoon sergeant for like 2013 through the pretty much the end of 2014. Um, he came from RRC, which is Ranger Reconnaissance Company, which is it's a recon or recce unit that it's tier one. So if you think about um like Delta Force, they are the premier direct action unit. RRC is like the premier reconnaissance unit, so they do like recon pretty much for all of special operations. It used to be I think it was called RRD before, and they
It
used to
was,
just
yeah.
do reconnaissance pretty much for like 75th Ranger Regiment, but then because of how good they were, they became a little bit larger and got basically used for all of special operations. Definitely, Mike Edwards is going to have a lot more to talk about that and have a better understanding than I do. But from what I understand, that was their mission. Um, and yeah, so he is an absolute stud. And he came in. I mean, he got us a bunch of really cool ranges and training that we wouldn't necessarily get as mortars. Um, and that was having him was again one of those like huge blessings just because the culture he helped create, like it still sucked being a mortar private, being like some of the new guys and stuff, but he helped. And again with Sandusky as well, they helped create a culture of basically success and making sure that we were all able to do our jobs
Well,
to the best of our ability.
yeah, let's drill down on that real quick because before we hit record on this, you were talking about Les a little bit. Les is obviously, as the viewer been a guest on the show. It's a great,
Yep,
wildly entertaining guy.
he is.
Can you? What are your memories of that? And I know you had high praise for him. And can you just kind of explain, looking back, how useful he was to you as a young ranger?
Yeah, he set all of us up for success. So like when I think I came in with a group of 11 or 13 guys. I can't remember the exact number of mortars um in our group. So there was like a large group of young rangers or new rangers. And then we also there are still some rangers there that hadn't gone to ranger school yet. And for your viewers, so um to become a leader inside the 75th Ranger Regiment, even though you go through RAS, you still need to go through Ranger school, get your Ranger tab. So that's a big part of being a Ranger, is you being able to do that. And Les Sandusky took it upon himself to not just train the guys in his squad, but like pretty much every single guy that didn't have a tab, of making sure that we understood how to graduate Ranger school. And because of him, like once guys got past um the obstacle course phase of Ranger school, uh, almost almost every single guy that like in our platoon graduated. It may have recycled a phase here or there, but um, pretty much every guy was able to graduate because of him, because he took the time to actually teach us. Because there can be NCOs that don't necessarily want to take care of their guys, um, or not. So not I shouldn't say take care, but um, don't have the same amount of enthusiasm for training and making sure that they're prepared. And Lesandowski had that. Like he like when anytime we had any downtime, or if there wasn't any like, hey, we gotta do a layout of equipment or go to this range, he would be having us sign out our M4s or different, the 240 or 249 saw out of the arms room, or getting our mortar cannons out of there, and just drilling us on the mortars. So that way we were always proficient at it. Like we're always proficient at our job. Um, and for your viewers, don't necessarily for your viewers as well, being a mortar, you either are part of the mortar section, so you're as a in the section supports the battalion, or then you have mortar teams like a two to depending on the manpower, a 1 to 3 man team that gets attached to a line platoon. So like, on deployment, I was attached to Alpha Company platoon, and for a lot of training events as well, is attached to that same platoon. Um, so yeah, he made sure that like Sandusky made sure we knew our job inside and out. He trained us on how to be a part of machine gun teams. So if that particular platoon we were attached to didn't want to take out mortars, the 2 man team could take out another 240 or a saw, and basically, we could still be useful to them. Um, so yeah, it was great having him. And at times too, uh, I guess I want to say like trained hard, played hard, because there's a time that we weren't necessarily doing anything. What we call our locker areas, or we call it the cage. So we're sitting in the cage, just kind of doing nothing, and he just comes in and he's moving stuff around, brought in some speakers, he's getting like our chem lights out, or what your audience might know them as like glow sticks, like those things that you break, or you snap, you shake them, and then they start glowing and stuff. So he's getting a bunch of those out, and then he turns off the lights, and he just like started a rave for us in the cage. Then we're all just like, I get it, being kind of goofy, but he was great for great for morale, because it can definitely be a suck fest, even once you're in Ranger Regiment, um during the year, just on different training and stuff like that.
When you get to Afghanistan, how quick? Well, first, were you excited to go? I mean, you said you
Yeah.
wanted to be in the Army since you were 12. Now you finally get the opportunity to go to war. What was going through your head?
I was very excited to go. About a couple days before we actually deployed, like getting on the plane to go to Afghanistan, I woke up in my barracks room in the middle of the night to use the restroom, and then like walking back to my bed, I just had like a little bit of I guess I want to call it like a panic attack almost, where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm deploying, like I could actually, I could die. Um, but that kind of subsided. And I had the same thing in airborne school as well before our first jump, where I was like, oh man, like the parachute could fail and I could die. But then as calmed down, I was like, yeah, you know what? We have everyone here is the best at their job. Like, we're gonna be okay. And then especially once we landed in Afghanistan, like all the jitters is kind of washed away. Just like, and I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. Especially when we were in Afghanistan, because we had complete air supremacy. Like it was, I never felt like there's always the, like, depending on the where we're going, like there could be some nerves, like, oh man, like this one could be a little sketchy, but it was never like, oh, I'm too scared to go out. I always felt comfortable the entire time we were there, even when like our little fob would get mortared or rocketed. It was just like, if I die, I die. Something, especially during those. But I know my job. I know my team leader knows his job. I know Toon Sergeant, like PL, like everyone on down knows their job. Everyone's the best at their job. We're gonna be okay. Like
So
even if
you
shit
you're
hits the
talking
fan, we're still gonna be okay.
and that's what I want to touch on. So you're talking about getting rocketed and mortared and your little forward operating base. Is the forward operating base just Army Rangers there, or is it a lot of people there?
There's so since it was kind of 2013, they're starting to do some of the drawdowns. So it was a company of Rangers, and then there's some other people. Like there's the Katuka Tejas. I think I said it right. The KKA, which is like the Afghan kind of special operation guys as well. Then there's some regular army guys there too. But like half the fob was unusable, was not necessarily being used, like it's being torn down. So like the number of people there is getting drastically smaller.
If you get what see, I've obviously, excuse me, I've never been in the military, never gone to
Yeah.
war. But what I'm curious about, because you were talking about getting rocketed and mortared on a pretty consistent basis, when you're at that location and mortars come in, is what happens next? Do you get your stuff out and then you try to find where they're coming for and hammer them? I mean, what's that like?
So most of the time, um, it our technology is incredible. So whether there's a rocket and mortar attack, the defenses on the fob are generally able to figure out where it's coming from. So then they're sending out Apaches, or we had some howitzers on the fob too that would just start shelling their position that they came from. So most of the time it's just air assets going up, or artillery going out and shooting at their position because they're close enough to shoot us. They're close enough for us to shoot back at them. Um,
Do you
so like,
remember? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
or no, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, the first time you ever go outside the wire and bullets are flying, mortars are flying, whatever it was, like this is the real deal. Like this is now combat. This ain't training. I'm in a foreign land and people are possibly getting killed. They're trying to kill us. What was your first taste of combat like? What happened? And was your reaction to it what you thought it would be?
So the first time like I like heard machine guns going off, we were at our blocking position, so being a mortar, um, and or I guess I'll back up a little bit. When we were doing our raids, you have the assault force that's going to go through the compound, and then you're going to have a couple of blocking positions basically, so nobody can sneak up on the assault force. The assault force is focused entirely on the building, and then um, we're in a blocking position. Basically, we're additional support for the assault force if they need it, or again, our main job is protecting people from basically sneaking up on them. Um, and so when that happens, we're at our blocking position, and it's cold out. We're in the mountains of Afghanistan. It's fall/winter. And so like we were like our group was standing up, or most of us were standing up. So bullets start flying, and my first reaction is just like, where's that coming from? Like I'm still standing, and the team leader's like, dude, get down, like get on a knee. I was like, what? It's like, oh, okay. Like I wasn't necessarily like, yeah, I wasn't like nervous or panic. I was just like, hey, where's this? What's happening? Like, what's going on? Like, I want to be a part of this. So yeah, that was kind of like my initial reaction. Was just like, okay, like it's happening. Like, cool.
And when you're in that situation, then as the mortar team, how's that work? So you're on a radio or someone's trying to ID where this fire's coming from and you start dropping mortars on their heads?
Yeah. So when we go out, we always have close air, like almost always close air support, and it's called like it's in step. So you got say like Apaches, and then you got maybe A-10s flying above them, and then you have AC-130s flying even higher above them, just kind of circling the area. On this particular night, they didn't necessarily need the close air support because the fire is just coming from a compound that we were going after a particular Taliban member. And then if I remember correctly, um, they had some belt fed machine guns and like of course like some AKs and stuff, and they're like throwing grenades. Um, So because of that, we can't necessarily shoot in the compound because our guys are too close to that, and we'd be shooting over them. And you're never going to shoot a mortar over friendly troops just because, in that horrific case, if there's a short round and it drops, it could hit our guys. Um, but there was a squirter, and a squirter for your viewers is a guy that basically is running away from the compound or running away from the assault force. And so the mortar team leader is calling over the radio, and he's like, "Hey, um, you know, mortars like we're set, we're ready to go. Like we can either go after him or drop mortars on this guy." And then the PL at the time was like, "Get the fuck off the radio." They're like, "Oh, all right." So it was just kind of like rats. Like we wanted to go after and like take care of them. Excuse me. But they're just like, nope. Like they already had somebody running after him. So that kind of sucked that we didn't get to be utilized in that firefight. But it is what it is. Thankfully, none of our guys got. I think, or I should say, I think one of our guys got like a. I think the only injury that night was like a sprained ankle. But most
How
like, thankfully, all of our guys were okay. We ended up. We ended up killing. I think we ended up killing the guy we were going after. And I'm using the royal we in that way. And the guy that ran away, I think, also got. I think he turned around and tried to shoot it if the guy's chasing him, so that he got put down as well. And then, but we did end up bringing up back one guy, if I remember correctly, and it was like the guy that lit. So the guy that lived with the compound wasn't the guy we were going after, but we brought him back anyway. And then once we did some more like he ended up actually being part of the Taliban as well. So it was a successful raid. Um, yeah,
when I interviewed Les, he said that, one of his experience with working the mortars was that if I can get the guy with my rifle, I might not use the mortars. I'm not going to show my
yeah,
full hand of cards. Did you have any experience with that where it's like, hey, we could use the mortars, but we go a step lower and we just act with our rifles?
yeah. Sort of. I would say on deployment, at least from what I experienced, is they want to call in their air assets more than they want to use mortars. So then there was a few nights that we went out as machine gun teams instead, just because they like there are some PLs or platoon sergeants that don't necessarily I shouldn't say like they don't like us as mortars, they just don't like the mortar weapon system um as much. Like they prefer to have their air assets. So
Gotcha.
but yeah, no, Les is 100% correct. Like you always try to use the least amount of force, or you don't. So that way you aren't tipping your hand. So whatever, like the lowest amount of force you can use to either successfully grab a guy on a raid or a target is what you use.
Makes perfect sense. Now, you had told me that you did have experience with, I believe you described as a nasty troops in contact when you were over there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be that kind of raid I was talking about. Just um, that I guess I would say it was nasty just because it was unfortunately civilians did die during that raid. It wasn't because like any of our guys were intentionally trying to go after them. It's just um, Taliban likes to use humans and children as human shields. So
And
that's kind of
do you find that, what are your thoughts about terrorists use women and children as human shields?
and scumbag drop them. But it's also one of those like you can't not engage those guys because they're still trying to kill you. Um, so it's one of those like it's yeah, it's one of the most unfortunate um situations, but it's still something that like for a lot of people um that have no military experience are going to look at that and say that's just awful, or why can't you just shoot around them, or try to get the it you kind of do, but it's also like you got to put put down the bad guy as quickly as possible. Like you're not going to give him a chance to um keep shooting back at you. So
Well,
it's just one of those like you drop them.
Well, one of the things that, and that's interesting, I agree with you 100%, by the way, but one of the things that I always hear from a lot of the guys I interviewed that were in Black Hawk Down, I've interviewed a handful of them, have been on the show. They always talk about how a lot of people in America criticize that like women, unarmed women got shot in Black Hawk Down. But what the media doesn't tell you when they told all those stories in the early 90s is they got shot because they were coming out into the streets and pointing the positions of where the Americans were
Yep.
hiding to guys with
Yeah.
machine guns and RPGs on the rooftops. So what are the
Yep.
Americans supposed to do? Just sit there and let their
Exactly.
position be given away?
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Combat and again, my experience is very limited. Like everyone else that you've interviewed that has a lot, I would say, is a lot cooler than I
Don't
am
sell
or ever
yourself
will be.
short.
Um, but yeah, even from my limited experience, yeah, it's not like you're fighting. It's not like fighting in World War II or something like that, where you know, for the most part, women and children are not part of the combat arms. Where in Afghanistan, like I mean, it's not something I experienced, but I've guys that started with experience where you got like 8, 10-year-olds picking up weapons trying to shoot at you. So then obviously you got to return fire. Like again, you're not going to let a 10-year-old keep shooting, even though he's like, yeah, you're not going to let a 10-year-old keep shooting at you and your guys, just because he's 10. Like if someone's picking up a weapon and they're a target, you gotta put them down. So
And when those scumbag terrorists, they're the people to blame for that. Everyone wants to
they
blame the
are.
soldier. The only person to blame when shit like that happens is the person who put those kids and those women
Yep.
in that
100%.
situation. I when we're done recording, because I don't want to bring it up on video, I will tell you a story I know from a dude Delta that is wild.
Okay.
You did tell me that you helped capture or transport a prisoner and his shoe got knocked off, and the CIA was very not pleased
Yeah.
with how the situation. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it wasn't actually the CIA, but I got for viewers and for like easy understanding, I'll call the guy like a CIA guy back at the fob. Um, uh, but so after one target, I don't think there, I don't think there is any, I don't think we exchanged fire on this raid. But my team leader, who's also amazing guy, is also like, and I'd be happy to talk about this guy as well. I don't know if I'll necessarily say his name. I don't know if he wants his name out there, but team leader I had on deployment was again a stud guy that actually took the time to train me and the guys in his team and set us up for success. So after one of the raids, he's like, "Hey, do you want to be the responsible for bringing this guy back?" And I'm like, I guess. I was like, "Sure." So like when we grab a guy off target, they're obviously got flex cuffs on them behind their back. They're wearing a puck, like we call it a puck mask, so they got a mask over their face so they can't see us or see where they're going and stuff like that. Um, and they also like we got like a little baggie around their neck with information about them. Um, and so like he's like so I brought this dude over and it's like, hey, you'll bring him back. And so we're sitting there waiting for the helicopter. Nothing's really going on with the guy. Like he's just kind of sitting still. I have my arm up behind his arms cuffed and like a hand on the back of his neck. So it's like, it's a lot easier to drag somebody around like that. But when we get ready to go on the helicopter, this guy, like, like understand, like, he's basically arrested going back to a fob to get interrogated. Um, and so he does not want to come with us. So he's like trying his best to like wriggle away. And, I have one hand on him and the other hand's on my M4. And like, I'm not going to take my hand off the M4. Like I'm not gonna, I'm keeping that as far away as I can from him. And so I'm just like, yeah, with wearing your kit and everything, and with a little bag on my back with mortar rounds, like I'm heavy. Um, and then trying to just use one arm to grab this guy, and like, so we're struggling the entire time to get on our Chinook, and he's pulling away, fighting. And even with the, you think with the prop blast from the Chinook too, like that's also pushing you away a little bit. So like I fighting with him, finally get him on there, and then he's the entire time he's like trying to wriggle away, like even when we're on the bird trying to get up. And at one point, like he slid his face, like he slid his face on the floor of the Chinook, and like got his mask up. So again, I'm like pushing his head down, like stop trying to move around, like because there have been times I don't know if Les told you about this, but he experienced the guy that think had broken free of his restraints and had to actually fight a guy, fight a terrorist on a Chinook on the ride back to their fob. Um, so like knowing that story, like I'm just kind of like, ah man, I cannot let this guy go. So I'm basically like sitting on the entire way back to the fob. We land, um, and I'm dragging him off the helicopter, and we're taking him to the CIA type guys that are collecting him. And we get there, and they like start screaming. I'm like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And they're like, where is shoes? Where is shoes?" And because like during our struggle somehow, like I'm guessing like out on the target, his shoes must have come off. And you're not supposed to bring a prisoner back without shoes and like make him walk across like rocks and stuff. And I was like, and I was like, I'm sorry, like he was fighting me the entire time. I wasn't really paying attention, but yeah, they were not very happy with me because of that. They were just yeah. I was like, okay, well, like he's all yours now. Like you can give him shoes.
And when
Um,
you would do a transfer like that, do those guys then get put on a helicopter and flown to a different location, or do they stay on your fob the whole time?
it depends. I think they put him in a van and like yeah, if I remember correctly, there was like a little van or vehicle there. They put him in and drove him somewhere. Because like I mean, we brought back guys to our fob and we would guard them for a while, um, until they would go somewhere else. Like most of them, yeah, do go to another location.
And I only have this has been a fascinating interview. I'm loving this. I have a few more questions for you. And
Yeah,
one of the things, this will keep a little bit lighthearted here before I get into a serious question. You told me the story about how they were serving, I don't remember if it was lunch or breakfast, but you guys started getting shelled and everyone ran for the
yeah,
protection. And then you guys just started feeding yourselves. Let's hear that one.
yeah. So we had our chow hall inside the ranger compound on our fob, which was which is pretty lacking. There was a point where all we got for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner was like fried chicken and white rice, um, for like a month or two, which is like for a few days in a row, like yeah, it's not bad. I like it. And then it's just like the same meal 3 times a day just gets old quick. But then there's the larger chow hall that the entire fob could go to. So we walked over there. And when there is a rocket and mortar attack, everyone's supposed to go to their bunker. And I'll actually tell you, you can kind of backtrack. Like the first day I get to Afghanistan or first night, because we landed at night. My team leader had gotten there like a week or two earlier before I did. Um, I met up with him, and he told me like Ski, if you wake me up for like a mortar attack or rocket attack, I'm gonna like yeah, basically he's gonna throat punch me. I was like, all right, I won't do that. So like our response to a rocket and mortar attack was basically just stay where you are. Um, you know, just whatever, like if whatever happens, happens. So like none of us ever went into our little bunkers. We just the first couple times it happened, I was like, but then like after a while, you just get numb to it. You ignore it. Um, and so yeah, we were in the larger chow hall. Um, we were in line because like there was a guy there that would, you could fill a bowl with what you wanted inside an omelet. They'd make the omelet for you. So we're waiting for that, and then like the mortar attack happens. Everyone leaves, including like everyone eating inside the chow hall leaves. Everyone like all the cooks leave, and like well we're hungry. I think we had uh just gotten back from a raid. So like we're all starving. We've been walking forever. So like all right, whatever. Like we're tired, hungry. We're like I was like I can make omelets, so it's not that hard. So I just walk behind the kitchen, the like the counter or whatever, the stove, and yeah, I just started like making omelets for the like our little group of guys, and we're getting our food, and eventually like the people are coming back in, and like the cooks are yelling at us like, "Get out! Like, what are you doing? You can't be back there." And it's like, "Well, we're hungry. You guys left." So I was like, even though they were like, "Get out!" Like I still finished making like the last 2 omelets for our guys and left. I was like, oh, "Yeah, like, we're here. Well, we'll finish."
I love
Um,
that. That
but
that
like
is
there is another time too. Uh, this part's sad. So like one of our dogs got killed on target. It was a different platoon, so not the platoon I was attached to, but there was this like a ceremony for the our dog that passed away or got shot. Um, so I was going with a group of um a group of Alpha Company guys that I was attached to, Second Platoon Alpha Company. So we're going to the funeral, and on the way there, uh, like we're in like a little bus driving to the other end of the fob. And on the way there was another rocket and mortar attack. Well, our driver, again, none of the Rangers cared. We just kept doing what we're doing. But I look across and there's two regular Army guys off in the distance, and they both start just taking off, sprinting. But one guy, like one of the guys, trips and falls. The other guy looks back, sees his buddy on the ground, and just keeps running. And he had dropped his rifle too. I was like, "What the hell? Like you, like what?" And like that, yeah. Like thankfully they're fine. A lot of people don't know this as well, but a lot of fobs had basically like these little automatic, almost Gatling guns. So when there is a rocket mortar attack, like they just search on the radar what it's coming from, they shoot, and almost every time they get the projectile coming in. Um, but yeah, it was just one of those, just like, what is that guy? Yeah, watching the guys like panic, sprint, and then one guy just like leave his buddy. It's like, too bad. I was like, my goodness.
You you
But
you had said speak because I it's a good segue because of the dog. And I interviewed a guy named Dave Nielsen who is a former Ranger Delta operator, and his dog was killed in
mm,
'06 or '05, and he struggled with that for a very long time.
yeah,
And the viewers know what we're talking about, but man, losing a dog's got to be brutal. But you also said that your specific group took no KIAs, but some
mhm,
other groups on where you were had, and that you were there for those killed in action ceremonies, and that was
yeah,
very moving. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah. So um, there were two Rangers, Patterson and Patterson and Hawkins. They were killed in um 2013. They were in Bravo Company. So they were on another fob, but yeah, when that happened, another mortar that was attached to another platoon to Alpha Company come up to me and is like, "Hey man, we've got to go take our KIA photos." There was a mass casualty event. And I was like, "Wait, what?" I was like, kind of like, "What are you talking about?" And then he told me, and we found out, and it was just, and then when we found, like, knew the names of the guys that passed away or guys that were hurt, um, yeah, that was like seeing the guys that were really good friends with them, like just kind of guys that were like the toughest guys out there, that are breaking down because they're their best friend just um their best friend just got killed or got maimed. Um, and yeah, that was rough watching guys I was friends with hurt that much. Um, and then for viewers that don't know, when like we got back from deployment, um, and there's generally like a large award ceremony, like sometimes family or friends will are come to these events as well. We're in a huge auditorium, guys are getting called on stage. Well, there's basically a final roll call, um, and like when they do call out like a roll call, so I start calling out names. People say present, like we'll stand up, say present. Like if it's the battalion commander doing it, and they'll say so and so is present, sir, and they call up the names of the person that has passed away. And man, like yeah, I guess when it's got yeah, it's a very hard experience to go through, and especially like if it's your best friend or if it's your son or daughter or husband that passed away, like that, hearing their names called off several times before someone finally says they're no longer with us, like that's yeah, it, it's it's a yeah, it's a horrible thing to experience.
And
um
and I
and
and I
it's one of
hope.
those.
Sorry, go ahead.
Or no, go ahead.
Well, and I can tell you're very emotionally moved by it, remembering being there, and the reason I bring that up is because I feel like a lot of young Americans, they just don't get it. I mean, they just don't get that people died fighting. I mean, people got wounded,
Yeah,
crippled, and that blood, that's real. And those families, those lives are never the
yep,
same after that. And I hope
yeah,
and I pray that young people who maybe weren't even alive when 9/11 happened, they understand that people paid it all. I mean, they got
they
killed
did.
on behalf of this country. And like I said, this is moving to me watching you even discuss it. So I thank you for being willing to talk about that because I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, it's something that I hope no one ever has to experience again. But like we just had the um three army personnel that were killed just recently, and like I can't imagine what those families are going through and what their friends are going through too. Like, yeah, it's just even in a even the non like combat arms like jobs in the military, like there's still danger there. Um, so yeah, it's just yeah, yeah, it's very real, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand too. Like the military, we're all over. Or again, using the royal we, I'm not in the military anymore.
Right.
But yeah, we have people all over. Like even though when you don't necessarily think that there are people risking their lives, like there people are. And also the nature of our job too. A lot, you know, people die during training events. Like there's helicopter crashes. There's different. You're handling explosives. At different times, so it's a very dangerous job. And, a very thankless job too, because like it's something I struggle with too. Like once you get out, like nobody cares what you did. Uh, so it's one of those things accepting like, hey, you're no longer there. You no longer have like for me when I was in, I had some very, very like very close friends. And now I'm happy. Um, Out of like a group of like four of us, I was the only one that got out. Um, the other three are still in. One went he's officer now. The other one is a warrant officer. He's flying on Black Hawk pilot. My other buddy is in SF now, or Special Forces, like Green Beret now. So that's also another thing. Like I'm super excited when I see guys I served with that are successful inside the Army still, or when they get out. Like there's guys I was in the Third Ranger Battalion with that have like started their own companies and go on to do like amazing things. So yeah, that too, that for me um is really big. Seeing the guys I served with being really successful.
I love hearing that. I love hearing that you like seeing other people succeed. That's another attitude we could use a little bit more of in this country.
Yeah,
This is a fun question. I like asking guys who were special operations but didn't go tier one. A lot of guys, Rangers, or they're maybe on a regular SEAL team. They talk about like Delta or SEAL Team 6, and they're like, those dudes are gods. Like dudes in Delta, like they're playing a different sport
yeah.
than the rest of us. You personally, two questions. What was your thoughts on Delta Force? Because that's like the next level for
Yeah.
Rangers. And did you ever have any experience with those guys of any kind? Did you ever see them anywhere, anything like that?
Never really saw those guys anywhere. At least that I'm aware of. We did know about them, and there were guys that would go to different briefs and like because they are recruiting briefs for them. So like obviously like, I know of them. I some of the bigger names of guys that were in Delta Force. Um, and that's something that like I thought about like potentially doing. One of the things that sucks is in 2014, I ended up breaking my ankle during like a training school, and I got screws in there. And it's actually why we had to delay our interview the first time. Is
Yeah.
like I'm still having issues with it. So it's one of those like and looking back on it now, I probably should have just like it's called med boarding, but like basically medically retiring out of the army. I had the opportunity to do that after I broke it originally, and I was like, nope, I'm gonna stay in. And then I just, yeah, kept having surgeries while I was in, and kept having the opportunity to get out medically. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to, like, my plan was to stay in for 20 years. That didn't happen, but, uh, um, yeah, no, like those guys are legends. Like, even learning about like guys like RRC, like when, your viewers hopefully get to see an interview with Mike Edwards, like just knowing guys like him, like they are on, uh, comparing Rangers, I would say we're almost like we're AAA baseball compared to like Delta Force or RRC, and those guys are the all stars. Those guys are the King Griffey Jr. of the military. Like those guys are just absolute legends, top of their game. Rangers, we pride ourselves on being the best at the basics. Those guys, from what I've seen, are even better. Um, so it's just yeah, it's definitely a step above. Definitely something that um I think everybody should aspire to be um to go, to want to be a part of like SEAL. If you're in the Navy, go to SEAL Team 6, or in the Army, go to Delta Force. I mean, if you're in the Navy, go to Delta Force. Try to go to Delta Force too. They take guys in from all branches, and I think RRC does as well now. The Rangers Reconnaissance Company. I don't think you just have to be in the Army to go to try out for them. But yeah, I think because you know I don't think complacency is good, and there's steps up even within Ranger Regiment. So guys that can stay, you can still stay in Ranger Regiment and do different jobs that require different skills. So I like, and I think that's one of the great things about regiment is guys that come in and grow up there, retire out of there, and yeah, they can still have they'll still have multiple different challenges throughout their entire career. So
Last question. This has been a great
yeah,
interview, and hang back for a second
will do.
when we stop recording. But this is my favorite hypothetical. I always am
Okay.
entertained by the answers. If let's just turn on the imagination for a little bit. Let's say you're flying in a Black Hawk with you and 11 other of your best Rangers. Maybe it's Mike Edwards, Les Sandusky, just 11 guys that you thought were stars. And you go through a time portal, and it's 1943 Germany, and you can fly to the Eagle's Nest, you and 11 other Army Rangers. Do you think you can take out Hitler?
Yeah, yeah, I think we could. I would probably be the dead weight on the team, considering. But yeah, I think the other 11 Rangers could. I would be. But yeah, no, I think just. I mean, it's almost like saying when people bring up like the question of like Babe Ruth would suck nowadays in baseball. It's like, well, of course, but he started like he changed baseball so we could get to where we are today. So like if we go back to the 1940s, we'd be leaps and bounds, you know, a lot better than some of those troops. But we also learned our doctrine from them, or our skills from them. So, but yeah, I think if you had the 11 best Rangers, and me, uh, the 11 best Rangers could take out, uh, could get into the Eagles' nest and get them.
I love that. Well, James, I want to say a huge thank you for doing this. I know you put me in touch with Mike Edwards' wife, which hopefully is going to set something up there as well. And I really do appreciate it. I know that you're a hell of an American, and I hope everyone enjoys this certainly as much as I did.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll probably say again, probably the least impressive person you're ever going to interview. And if and then I would be happy to get you in touch with some other Rangers that I served with as well, because like again, they're they're guys that have just absolutely amazing careers, are absolute studs. Um, yeah. So I appreciate you having me on.